Hi, my name is Amber Summerow, and you're listening to the Homeschool Success Stories podcast, where I interview homeschool moms. Hi, welcome again to another episode of the Homeschool Success Stories podcast. This is episode number 4 with Ashley Kim. Ashley's kids are 8 and 10 years old, and she tells us all about how she got started homeschooling, and she basically follows more of an unschooling approach and some world schooling. They went to the Dominican Republic and had plans to go to Spain before the pandemic hit. Anyway, I think you'll find her approach really useful and interesting. So let's get to it. Well, thank you for agreeing to come on and talk to us about your homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling experience. Why don't we just start off and have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about why you decided to go this route?
All right, my name is Ashley Kim. I have 2 kids. They are 8 and 10, almost 11. And my daughter, she's the older one, she was in public school for a couple of years. And when she was in second grade, she just started second grade, we moved from one state, we're in the US, one state to another. And it just seemed like a good time to change things up. I had been curious about unschooling before then, and I'd never anticipating homeschooling at all. That was just not on my radar at all. But it seemed like a good time to try something new. So when we moved, she didn't go back to school. My son didn't go back to preschool.
And
And
how old was she?
she was 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that ever since.
So you liked it, obviously.
Yeah, I did. I like the freedom, the flexibility of it. It just feels more right for
Mm-hmm.
us. I mean, at the time when she went to kindergarten, first grade, that felt right
Mm-hmm.
for a few reasons, and then it felt right to make the switch also.
So you said she's 10 now?
Hmm.
So you've been doing it for 3 years?
Yes, I guess this year was our 4th school
Oh,
year,
okay. So
because
three and a,
she would be in
so
5th
almost,
grade.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hmm.
So, what are some like what things have helped the most, or what have you found that has been that you've liked the most that has kept you doing it?
I think it goes back to that freedom, just that we can do what we want
Yeah.
most of the time, with the exception of the coronavirus. We can
I
go,
know. Yeah.
we can go
Not
where
as
we want
easy
to
to
go.
homeschool now.
It's not. We can do activities that they're interested in. We can go places. We can uh, structure things the way we want to, or
Yeah.
not structure them.
Yeah, yeah. So you say you're so have you been following kind of more of an unschooling approach?
Yes, we have.
So do you want to explain kind of what you do, kind of what your schedule is like and
Hmm.
how it's different?
Um, I guess overall, our schedule varies depending on basically what activities and classes they're enrolled in. They've been involved in homeschool co-op in the past. They've taken classes online. They've been involved in other programs. And so our schedule, it's usually kind of consistent for 8 to 12 weeks at a time. And then their classes or their activities will change, it it will be rearranged. So it's all around that. I guess we structure it mostly around whatever they're signed up for. And
Mm-hmm.
then beyond that, we may be doing something, we may go to a children's museum, or we may go to on a hike, or whatever. We may just be at home with books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you follow any curriculum, or how do you decide, like how do you determine like what to do? Like,
Hmm. So we're unschoolers, so it's really unschooling. There's no separation between life and learning. It's self-directed education. It's basically following the kids' interests, their passions, their curiosities. And so that can look like a variety of things. If one kid says, I'm interested in this, then we can look into it. I mean, depending on what it is, whether that would be a class, whether that would be a book, whether it would be a program. It's just really following their lead. And so as an example, my son, last summer, he was still 7, and he wanted to learn to read. He hadn't learned to read, but he said to me, I want to learn to read. And so I thought about it. I looked around what would be a good resource or resources for him. And I went to an online site, Outschool, and I found him a class and a teacher. After scrolling through a ton of them, I found ones that I thought might fit for him. And I said, do you want to do this? And he said, yes. So that was how he started learning to read. And he would still say today that he can't read yet, or he can't read well, but he has a goal. He told me a few weeks ago, when I can read this particular book, that's when I'll say that I can read. And so that's just an example of following his lead. And my job is like support person for finding the resources that would work for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So what are some subjects that you guys have delved into in your own so far?
Yeah, I guess there's no particular subject except for in that matter, it's, it's reading. I feel like everything kind of is intertwined. So my daughter has taken a few online classes that are very specific, like history, or I'm trying to think what else. She's done some math things online. And then our homeschool co-op, it could be robotics or science or anything like that. It's just varied and based on their interests. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I would imagine that your kids help around the house
Mm-hmm.
and help cook and clean, and you know, I mean, when they're young too, it seems like everything is new. So like
Mm-hmm.
everything is interesting, you know. Um, let me look at my list here. Yeah, let's see. So what recommendations would you have for someone who is looking into unschooling? Like, what are some things that I'm sure there's like some kinks, you know, you can't, well, maybe you can. I mean, maybe this is a question, like, because I know for me, if I don't have like something of a schedule, like I know I have to make breakfast, I know I have to make lunch, I know I have to make dinner. Um, and then like for my kids, we just kind of have like, there's a few things that we have to do. Like we have to clean our rooms, we have to eat, we have to, you know, at least I give my kids assignments. We're a little more structured because
Mm-hmm.
I've got 8. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, you know, we kind of cover the basics, and then they can kind of go off and do their own thing. And it's like, as long as you get like your basic stuff done,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't care what else you do, as long as, you know, but you've got to practice the piano, you got to read for at least 20 minutes, and, you know, get your chores done and brush your teeth and get dressed, stuff like that. We have to actually put that on our list, or we might not get dressed that day, you know. So how does like your daily, how does that kind of go? And like, how do you incorporate like learning as you're living, or do you just live and you're like, this is it, like this is life?
Pretty much, yeah. Learning is living. Living is
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
And it's the same as an adult. I'm not technically in school, but I'm always learning
Yeah.
and following my curiosities and signing up for things, even if it's just a free webinar on some topic I'm interested in. So it's kind of the same thing. And I guess for us, or for me, I try to pare down the have tos.
Hmm.
I pare those down, and I find out that there are things that, maybe my cultural programming tells me I have to do, but I don't actually have to do that. We don't
Hmm.
have to do that.
So can you give me an
So,
example of that, of
um,
something that you're like, wait, we don't actually need to do this?
I guess, geez, there's so many. I mean, in the broadest sense, I don't have to send my kids to school. We
Yeah.
don't have to recreate school at home.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have to create some checklist of things they need to know or be able to do. I don't have to force certain subjects upon them, or I don't have to expect them to know X, Y, and Z.
So now you, did you say you graduated in biology?
I did, yeah.
So did you have to kind of unschool yourself a little bit?
Yeah,
So do
so
you want to tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, so that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So I have a bachelor's in biology, which was standard, state university education. So the first answer to your question is yes, I had to de-school myself, absolutely. And my second answer is that my master's program, I have a master's in environmental studies with a focus in environmental education, and it was through a self-directed program. So the way it worked was I created my courses. I would write a course description. I would comb through resources and compile a list of books, journal articles that I would use to support my learning. And then I would turn that over to my advisor, and she would say, she was kind of like the parent in an unschooling situation. She would say, well, here's what else I recommend you adding to your list. It was her job to have a broader knowledge base than me, so that I could get what I needed, because it's an accredited program as well, so there are some structures in place. But so her job was to make sure I wasn't missing anything, and then my course plan would go to the head of the department for final approval. So I had this background in self-directed education that I honestly forgot about at
Uh-huh.
first when I became interested in unschooling. And then for a while I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh wait, I know how this goes. I've done this with
Yeah.
more, like I said, more structure, because it is an accredited master's program, but
Mm-hmm.
still so much of it is the same. It was interest led, and I was
Yeah.
designing my own work and choosing what I wanted to read. And then, I'd do my reading. Each class consisted of reading and then writing a 15-page research paper. So it was that sort of parameters that were in place. You have to write a 15-page research paper.
Uh-huh.
But as far as what the topic was or what my course was, that was all up to me. So um, so the answer was both. I had experience in this self-directed education, and
Yeah.
also I was still very much ingrained in learning in school looks like this.
Right. So that probably helped you when you sent your kids to school and you're like, wait, but I did my master's and all I had to do, I got to do what I wanted, right? So why do we have to do all this other stuff? Is that kind of what happened when you sent your daughter to school? Or how did you,
Um,
or
not
did you just go ahead?
Yeah, I don't know. No, it wasn't. I mean, I guess actually it wasn't so much her going to school that made me think that. I had a job of several years ago, I think maybe 7 years ago. I worked for a nonprofit outdoor science organization. So they did school programs, um, teaching outdoor science, basically outdoor education, outdoor science. And I've done these types of programs in the past for other organizations, but my job was professional development. So I was teaching teachers to use the outdoors as an extension of their classroom. And so everything I did for them, any workshop I planned or anything else, it had to incorporate the Common Core and next generation science standards. So I got pretty familiar with those for a certain grade range, like 3 to 5, or maybe into middle school as well. And so that's when I got thinking, for some reason, this one fourth grade science standard of you must know about weathering and erosion. For some reason, that one stuck in my head. Of all of them, I don't know why, it doesn't matter, but that one stuck in my head of why do fourth graders need to know about weathering and erosion? Why not other things? Why this at all? Just why? Who decides these things? Whose values are these based on? Why does this matter? Adults can't tell you what weathering is. So that more than anything, because it was around the same, it was 2013 and she started, or 2013, 2014, I think that I worked there, and she started kindergarten around the same time. So it was an overlap of the two. I think I was thinking, here's, every day I'm working with what my kids are supposed to be learning at some point in time, and is this really necessary?
Yeah.
Does this matter? Does this align with my values or my husband's values or what we think our kids need to know
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
what they want to know, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so do you, yeah, I totally get it. It took me actually a while to unschool also, because I had seen people that were successful homeschooling. So I was like, okay. So I like read about it, like, we'll try it out on my 4-year old. And I'm like, here, you've got to write all this, and she's like writing and writing. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're the guinea pig, for my
Yeah,
but over
right.
time, it's like, oh, well, actually, like once the kids know how to read and write and, do basic math, like, how do you decide what to study?
Hmm.
And yeah. So, I mean, there's certainly basic things that you want them to know, but it does kind of come out as you learn, like, as you learn other things, like, you can't, like, you have to know other things to learn this thing. And, well, why I mean, that's just how learning is. So yeah. So uh you've kind of answered what the best thing about homeschooling is. What are some of the must do's that you find now that you've been doing it a couple years? um I think one question that I know a lot of people will have is, how can I guess how do you have the confidence to let some of this stuff go?
That's a
I
great
know a lot
question.
of people, they struggle with that.
Yeah, so it starts with self-trust. And that's not just a switch you flip. That's years of me working on me in order to be able to have that trust in myself and then have that trust in my kids. So that is number one, absolutely top of the list is, in my opinion, when it comes to homeschooling, but specifically unschooling. I have to have faith in me as the one who's, the instigator of this whole unschool thing.
Yeah.
That's me, and that's where it begins.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what is confidence? It's just trust in yourself. And
Yeah. So how did you develop that?
honestly, sheesh. I mean, I guess it, and I could answer that in so many different ways. I could answer that as being a kid playing sports. I could answer that as um, I became a life coach like 5 years ago. So just the
Mm-hmm.
training to do that involved a lot of work on me. And so I've been life coaching ever since. So I've been learning about myself ever since, and growing, doing what I can to grow and to learn and to let go of unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
beliefs that I maybe didn't even realize I was carrying around. And so, yeah, I guess it's an undoing. It's a process of undoing. Just like deschooling is a process of letting go of our ideas of education. In
Mm-hmm.
school, it's kind of the same thing, letting go of all of these stories and beliefs that probably weren't even ours, that were put on us by family or
Mm-hmm.
community or culture, letting go of all of the ones that are not really healthy for us or that
Mm-hmm.
just don't feel right to us,
Mm-hmm.
which leaves us with more trust in ourselves, more
Yeah.
faith that we can make our way in a healthy way.
Yeah. So do you have some resources that you would recommend people look
Oh,
at? I mean,
goodness.
everybody's different.
Mm,
I mean,
that's a
it's,
great question. I think actually the first thing that comes to mind is like the only parenting book that I think is helpful. I've only read maybe 3 of them because I think for the most part they don't align with what I believe. But that one is Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn. And so it starts with, I read it when my kids were like 1 and 3, but the premise is it is actually in trust, unconditional parenting, not having punishments, rewards, just building the relationship, making that first and foremost. What is this relationship? Not random rules, not expectations for who they should become or who they should be right now. Um, so that's the first book that comes to mind, first resource. I'm sure there
yeah,
are others, but
that's good. Do you want to share a little bit about your beliefs and kind of what um is your foundation?
yeah, okay. So I guess it goes back to that book, actually. Connection matters more than anything. That's the start. Connection with my children matters the most. And that doesn't mean that they're happy all the time or that they don't get upset with me. It just means there is a solid ground, a bedrock underlying everything, and that doesn't go anywhere. And from that, we can build anything together. And so that's another piece. It's that we're teammates in a way. I mean, I have more life experience, my brain is fully developed, all of that, but they are valuable people who are worthy, who matter, who have opinions and insights that blow me away at times. And they are worthy of trust and respect. And, you know, whatever, like my son, who's 8, he wants to be interviewed like this. He said, why are they always asking the parents, the moms? Why is nobody asking us? We're the kids who are being homeschooled or whatever.
We may, you know, down the road, but we're going to do a few moms first.
Right.
Yeah.
I just said, you're exactly right. Maybe we'll do an interview together, me and you.
Yeah.
Because that's I guess what we're building towards, where they know that they matter, and it's not just, this isn't something that's being done to them. And if they feel like something's being done to them, then we can address that. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it comes back to that, just that connection, the depth of relationship.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, it's one of those things I think that is really hard for people to grasp, especially in our culture, because we want to have numbers and we want to have like, there, I'm successful. See, you know, I did XXX, but it's really like some of this internal stuff that you really can't measure, except for maybe, you know, 20 years down the road. Yeah, it's been nice for me because I remember being where you're at, when my oldest was 10 and she's now 21. She just turned 21. 21? No. Anyway, but yeah, there were lots of times where I was like, am I wrong? Like, is this really gonna work and stuff? And so it's really nice in the end, because she's a great person. I mean, all my kids are just, they're nice kids and they get along with each other. We get along with them. Like, we haven't had the teenage, like typical teenage experience, you know, that is supposedly typical, but it's like, why does that have to be, you know? But yeah, it's kind of hard to explain like how to do that. And I think it's sometimes hard for people, I guess, to let go. So what has helped you, or like, how have you, is it just something that's inside you that you just go by with, well, this feels right? Or is there another way? Like, how, is there any way to quantify it, or can we just
No.
Yeah.
No, it's blind faith, but not really, because it's about what's inside of me. There is no checklist. You know, I think people want a how do you do this? And that's just a symbol of lack of trust in yourself. If you need that guide, that blueprint, here are the boxes you check in order to be successful at this, and there isn't one. So for me, it's success at this point in time is basically, am I following my internal guidance system? That's the biggest measure. And if I'm not following it, then it usually wreaks havoc. But if I am, then it doesn't mean that everybody's happy all the time. It just means that I have this calm, centered part of me somewhere that's going, yes, this is the path. This is the next right step, or whatever the case may be. And that's really all I have to go on. That's the only, I mean, you know, I had this conversation with my daughter just a couple weeks ago. We were talking about trust, and I was telling her that the most important thing you can have is trust in yourself. It starts there. And from there, you get to decide who else you trust and to what degree you trust them. And we had this incredible conversation, and she came back the next day or a couple days later and said, I have another question about trusting myself. And it's just been amazing. And to set that example, which is what I mean, I didn't set out to do that, but I can't talk about trust and try to teach her something that I'm not doing myself. So
Right.
it's setting I guess I'm being the role model I want to be in that regard. I don't know. I haven't
Well,
thought of it till right now.
that feels good, doesn't it?
It
That's,
does. That
yeah,
really does for the things that I, feel like, oh man, I wish I hadn't done that or said that, and then I
yeah,
apologize or whatnot. But I'm like, this is one thing where I feel like I've got this. I'm pretty I'm
yeah,
pretty on track with this.
yeah. You've figured out for you what that looks like and how
Right.
that feels for you.
And
Um,
that's why there's no blueprint, because it is mine, uniquely
right,
mine. For you, it would be different. For somebody else, it would be different.
right.
Everybody has to figure out, find their own voice, their own inner voice, and
Which can be a really frustrating thing because why can't I just get a list,
right.
Why can't I just,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I just find that really fascinating. I think some of it too, you have to be really honest with yourself, and uh, you have to be willing to do hard things and things that you don't want to do, and think about things probably that you don't maybe want to think about. Would you agree? Is that
I would agree that it takes willingness to be uncomfortable with yourself at times.
because
That is
otherwise
the
you can't
hard part.
change, right? If you're,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're
Willingness
already
to be
perfect,
uncomfortable.
already know everything, then
Yeah. Yeah. Then you
yeah.
can't learn. Right. That's the hard part for
So
sure.
are there times, like, for you, what kind of works for you? Like, if you feel like you're getting a little bit off,
Hmm.
what do you do to
Oh,
recenter?
that's such a good question. Um, I think, honestly, that was probably my biggest concern with homeschooling, is that was me getting off, as in, I'm a pretty, I want to say severe, but that's not a good word. I'm a pretty strong introvert. And so if I'm going to be with my kids all the time, then things are more likely to go off the rails, because I may not be getting the time for me that I need. And so I guess that's kind of one of my guides. If I'm like, oh, I'm feeling trapped, I want to get out, I want to run away, um, then I know it's time to do something for me. So that could be, at this point, because my kids are 8 and 10, I can just go to my room, shut the door, say, leave me alone for a little while. I can read, I can take a nap or whatever. So I think it's really starts with giving myself permission to do what I need to do for me. And
Hmm.
they don't necessarily like it. They may say, but we want you to do X, Y, or Z. And it's
Yeah,
like, but I also need to take care of me, and I can be
yeah.
a better mother for you if I'm doing that. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but
I think it
yeah.
totally does. And I think that's an important thing for homeschool parents to recognize is, because we do want to do the best for our kids and give them everything, but we can't if our tank is empty. And we
Right.
have to do whatever we need to do to um, refill our tank. And for you, it sounds like reading, just taking time for yourself. Um,
Going for a walk.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, when my kids were little, I mean, my youngest is 7 now, so it's much easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, with little kids, I mean, I'm an extrovert, so I had to make sure that I had like play dates. I didn't have enough positive interaction, then I didn't do well. So
Mm,
yeah, so but I need alone time too, but not as much. So
yeah.
but yeah, and that was, yeah, that was a concern for me when I started homeschooling. So everybody's different. So
Mhm.
so are your kids both introverts or extroverts, or have you had to?
Yeah, my daughter is more introverted. She's definitely, hang back, observe, watch what's going on, and she needs time alone to recharge. But at the same time, she wants to do all the things. She
Yeah.
wants all the activities, all the classes, all the stimulation.
Yeah.
She is really like, I've said before, sucking the marrow out of the bones of life. She is going for it
Oh
all,
yeah.
and which, yeah, blows my mind. And then
Yeah.
my son is more extroverted, definitely more outgoing, uh, more wants to be with another person talking about the Legos they're building or something like that. That
Uh-huh.
interaction is key for him. But at the same time, he can spend all day, and he does this a lot, listening to audiobooks and building with Legos, and he can
Mm,
be content that way too.
yeah. Yeah, because I have heard, some homeschool moms who I've known who are introverts had a hard time because their kids were extroverts. Like, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do that many activities.
Right.
Yeah, and introverts are much easier to homeschool. My
Maybe,
oldest
maybe.
was very extroverted, and yeah, I mean, it's everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
They've all got their things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I'm gonna open up my little list of questions here. So what has been the best thing about homeschooling for you?
The freedom, the flexibility to go places, do
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Um, do you want to talk about your short time in the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, so I think it was actually a couple of months before we moved and my daughter stopped going to public school that one day I woke up out of the blue and I Googled unschooling while traveling and I discovered Worldschooling. And so that kind of became a goal. And over, the next few years, we would do trips here and there. But I wanted to move towards full-time traveling. And so at the end of last year, I guess literally Christmas Eve, we left our house in Montana. We rented it out. We sold all of our stuff. We drove across the country to Georgia to visit my mom, just very briefly. And then we got on a plane on New Year's Eve to go to the Dominican Republic. So my kids joined the first session of the Worldschooling, which is a new
Mm-hmm.
traveling, I don't know if you've heard of it, but
I
traveling
have, yeah.
democratic nature school. So they took part in that. So they were going 5 days a week, 5 hours a day to this program, which was they spent their mornings at the beach, on the beach. They didn't go in the water, on the beach, kind of in free play. And then the afternoons were at this school building where they had voted on classes they wanted, and then they'd sign up for the classes. So there was cooking and math and dance and art and drama and Spanish. And so we did that for a couple of months, 2.5 months. And then we ended up leaving early and the program closed because of coronavirus. And we went back to my mom's house in Georgia. And so our plan was actually to be leaving today, I think, to go to Spain for the next session of the Worldschooling. We were going to keep doing it for another few months. But that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Everyone's
we
plans have been interrupted. Yeah.
right. So after years of working towards something, we got started and then had to stop, which has been great too, because we've always lived so far from my mom and now we're with her all the time.
Uh-huh.
We're just kind of
Yeah.
parked ourselves at her house, and
Yeah.
which has been really good. It's different than we had planned, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not worse or better.
Yeah.
It's really good in its own way, and so I'm excited about that too.
That is such a great attitude. Like, you're just such a good example of what you're trying to do. Like, just it's life, right? Like, instead of being like mad that you couldn't finish the program, you're
Yeah,
like, but now we're here and there's opportunities here too. So I
yeah.
like
Thank
that. I
you.
think that's a really good attitude.
Thank you. It,
Um,
it feels good.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah, then you're happy, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's good. Um, so what do you think is the hardest part about homeschooling, unschooling, uh, just living your life the way that you do? Because for you,
Oh,
that I can tell there's really no difference. It's just
yeah. Yeah. As more time goes by, any separation becomes less and less.
mm-hmm,
And so, honestly, I feel like the hardest part at this point still goes back to what do I need? What are my needs?
mm-hmm,
Um, how do I take care of myself?
mm-hmm.
And recognizing, I found for me there are trade-offs in that there are things I want to do that are for me, not in just in general, like daily maintenance of myself, but like
Mm-hmm.
bigger ideas or dreams I have. And I think
Yeah.
if I start, I try to work on some of those, but I get overwhelmed and
Yeah.
resentful and whatnot. So it's, I guess, making conscious trade-offs and saying, but here's what I want right now. I want to be homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling with my kids. And later I will be able to devote 100% of my time if I want to these other things, but I can't do this later.
Right.
This
Right.
can
Yeah.
only be
This is
now.
now.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that's hard and I get, I guess, self-pitying or whatnot, but in
Yeah.
general,
Yeah.
it's a conscious choice I've made. This is what I've decided to do. And when it stops working on the whole, then if it stops working on the whole, then we'll reconsider. But for
That's
now,
really good.
yeah.
That's I really appreciate that. That's really good. I've had to do the same thing. There's only so many hours in the day, and I think that probably is one of the hardest things is finding the proper balance where you
Hmm.
feel like, okay, I am doing enough things for myself,
Hmm.
but I'm also doing like the most important things.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's definitely a balance. So have you changed over time in your unschooling journey? And if you have, like, how?
Hmm. My initial reaction to that is I haven't had enough time to answer that question yet. Like it's
Okay.
even though I'm used to doing this now, it's also
Uh-huh.
like, but we just started a
Yeah,
minute
yeah,
ago, which
yeah,
isn't true. It's been 4 years or close to it. I don't even know. Uh, um, so I don't think I know yet, but I guess what I do know is that I am less ingrained in the mindset of here's what education has to be. That's
yeah.
really, and maybe I'm more trusting of myself too. I probably am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
much remains to be seen.
how do you think, like, what do you think the value in traveling is? Like, why did you want your kids to travel?
Mhm.
And what benefits did you see them reap from it?
I think, I guess it's just opening up to, I mean, that's pretty standard answer, but opening up to the larger world. What else is out there? What other cultures or values are out there? I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And if you spend your whole life in the US or even one part of it or one town, all you know is that it where you are. It's like we're all like, culture is a marinade, we're all soaking in it, and you only know your flavor of marinade unless you get out and start paying attention to other flavors of marinade and
Yeah.
and seeing um, what's going on and what you can learn. And what, I guess, really it's about seeing your own plate, for me, seeing my own culture in a new light based on
Mhm.
what I see in other places, what I learn from other places, seeing myself in my own place differently, more clearly, or anything more critically even. And so for my kids, it's just it's the same thing. What can they learn? What can they be exposed to? It's really about growing their world. And
Mhm.
um, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but
I no, I think that's great. I mean, that's what travel is, and I think the whole world right now has a little bit of grief
Mhm.
for not being able to travel because it's just mind opening, and it's not something that you can even, like, it's really hard to express, which is why people do it, because you just have to go,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
otherwise, yeah.
And it's like we were saying earlier about being willing to get uncomfortable with yourself in order to go. Travel is an excellent way to be uncomfortable a whole lot.
Yeah, yeah, for
When
sure.
you don't know the customs, you don't know the language, maybe you don't know how the bus system works, you don't know
Right.
anything. It's like it's constantly
Yeah,
and I feel like even that, I hadn't thought of this till right now. It's good practice for times like this when you can't control anything.
it's true.
Travel does that. It's like you can't control this. You're uncomfortable. You don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
and so you can. those lessons can be woven into any aspect of life.
Yeah, for sure. I know. We moved to France, I guess we're coming up on 4 years. But
Mhm.
yeah, we sold everything. We just have like a little tiny storage unit with the kids as like most important things. And
Mhm.
we decided to leave because as soon as our daughter, she wasn't allowed back in, we decided to leave it. And, I packed up in one day everything
Wow.
that we needed, like our books.
Hmm.
um, and yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do that 5 years ago or 6 years ago. It's definitely, I think traveling definitely helps you prioritize and make decisions.
Hmm.
There are just a lot of advantages to it. And it's something that we have to kind of trust ourselves on, because there's no checklist of traveling and being adaptable and and yet I'm flexible, and yet those are really valuable skills.
Hmm.
um so what key things do you think has given you success? Is there, I mean, you've talked about a lot of them already, but is there like a one main one that you would like recommend people
Hmm.
do?
I guess it really goes back to me and trust in myself and my ability to trust my kids. And I'm cutting my husband out of all of this. He can have his own perspective. So I want to acknowledge that he does exist and he is part of this, but I don't want to speak for him. And because I am the ringleader here, for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
I'll just speak for myself. But it really is that just, and I guess that's part of it is leadership. We're all leaders within our families.
Mhm.
Um, who do I want to be as a leader within my family? And
Mhm.
what example do I want to set? And so thinking about those things helps with the unschooling, the world schooling,
Mhm.
the mothering.
And that leads to another question I know a lot of people are going to have, and that is, what have you done for work to be able to, for you to stay home? And I assume that you mainly stay home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um, I work very part time as a life coach for moms, primarily moms with rage. And I've been doing that for, I think, almost 5 years, or off and on. I've taken a few breaks because, again, it comes back to those trade offs and I get
Mm.
overwhelmed
Yeah.
trying to do it all. And so there's that. My husband he's a carpenter. He was a wildland firefighter for the Forest Service for a long time. That was his career, and he gave that up so we could switch to world schooling full time travel. And so he quit maybe just over a year before we left for the Dominican, and he went back to carpentry, which he had done in the past, and just for a short while. And so that's obviously a job he can't do remotely.
Right. Yeah.
so so it's kind of, we've relied on, well, some of his ingenuity. Before we left our house, he built an apartment that we could rent out, and we
Mm.
have a short-term loan on it, so we're not making income on it yet, but in a few years that will be straight income for us. And so it's kind
Nice.
of like we're just in a gap now. We have a few investments that can last us, I don't know how long, not very long, a few
Mhm.
more months maybe.
Mhm.
But it's really, it goes back to faith and the we'll figure this out. And
Yeah.
if we don't, we'll do what needs to be done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you have to get a job, you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the kids need to go to school for a year, they can.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there's no
Totally.
like,
Mm-mm.
oh, we
It's
must now we're, yeah. And that is one attitude that I've found in the homeschool community that I've had a hard time with the whole time. I'm sure it's not in the unschoolers, but I haven't been around that many unschoolers. Um, but just this idea, well, you need to be a real homeschooler. And if you
oh,
deviate from, then you're not a real homeschooler. Because if you're just doing a
right.
curriculum at home, that's not real homeschool. It's like, you know what?
Oh,
It works for them, okay?
yeah.
So, or for
Yeah.
now, or it can be a step, or,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe their kid just likes that.
Yeah.
Maybe that fits
Totally.
them. So,
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for being willing to course correct or just, make changes as people's needs change, as the kids' needs change, or the parents' needs change. And
Yeah, I love
not,
that.
and not just being stuck and rigid and this is what we're doing. I remember years ago, before I ever considered homeschooling, my kids were like baby and 2 or something, and I asked a homeschooling mom, how long are you going to do this? And it was an innocent question. I didn't
Yeah.
care what she was doing, but I
Right,
remember her saying, this is what we're doing. And I was like, okay, I won't ask you any more questions. Like, I didn't know. I
Yeah.
was just curious. Like,
Yeah.
because some people think, I mean, I've learned since then, some people are like, well, we'll do this until high school or whatever.
Mhm.
They'll say, we'll do this, for
Yeah.
as long as we feel like. And
Yeah.
so I've never asked anybody else that question.
You're like, yeah.
And now I understand why she was defensive about it, because people ask that with, they have an
Yeah.
agenda when
Like,
they ask that. And I
certainly you're
honestly
gonna
did.
give up, right?
Right. And I had no
Yeah.
agenda whatsoever, but I understand that people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I avoid that.
That's funny. Yeah, that's good. I love that. My questions left. But I know the other question that people are going to have is, what are some things that you do or that you've found that helps build the connection with your children and helps build trust in your family?
Wow, that's a really good question. Ooh. I want to go back to me, not because I like talking about me, but because that honestly feels like where it always starts. It's got to be me looking at what pushes my buttons, what triggers me into a reaction with them that I don't necessarily want to have or that isn't healthy, and working to dismantle those triggers, those buttons, then so that I can be calm and patient and open to hearing their opinions or their sides of the argument or whatever the case may be. And I don't even remember your question
No,
now.
that's really good. No, I was just asking what do you do to I mean, you're totally answering it, because what do
Mhm.
you do to be able to build that connection and trust
Right. Okay.
with
Yeah, that's
family? Yeah.
it.
You
Yeah. So
have to be centered. If you're not
mhm.
centered,
It's a
then
mess.
then you're going to get irritated a lot more
hmm
easily, right?
Yeah, and it's like an escalation of, here's the kid doing something, here's the parent reaction, then the kid ups the reaction, then the parent, and it just keeps
Yes.
escalating, and it's out of
Yes.
control, and it's ridiculous, and I feel like it's a waste of time, it's a waste of life.
Yeah.
So what can I do? Who do I need to be? What can I do undo within me so that when the kid goes here, I go
Yeah,
here.
right. So that you can help the kid. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's
I
excellent.
can just be the calm centered presence while they're the freaking tornado blowing through the house.
Right, which is how it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah, but we have
But
to
we're all,
unlearn a lot of things.
yeah.
Yeah,
I imagine this is some of the stuff that you do in your coaching that
it
you
is.
help
Yeah.
people with.
hmm
So what
Yeah.
are some things that you tell your clients, or what's one of the first questions or things that you have them do?
Well, so the way coaching as I know it works is I ask them questions. It's about finding their answers, finding what works for them. Just as we were saying earlier,
Mhm,
what what homeschooling looks like for everyone is different, or what our
mhm.
internal guidance tells us is different for everyone. So it's about that, just helping them get clear on the knowledge they already have within themselves that they probably don't know they have, or they have trouble
Mhm,
listening to because there's outside voices saying, but you have to do this, or you should do
mhm.
that, or whatever. So it's just kind of clearing through that and getting to their wisdom. It's not
Wow,
about mine.
so
I just know how to ask questions.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, maybe we should switch.
Okay, next
We
time. Yeah.
can't all do everything, huh?
Right, right.
Yeah. So yeah, that is just that I just think that's so good. And yeah, this is part of the reason I'm really enjoying doing this podcast, because I'm meeting all these really interesting people and all these
Mhm.
people who have like found what works for them and
Mm.
have done it. And it's like, kudos, yay. Like
Yeah.
this is, yeah, this is great. So, I guess before we end, do you have any parting advice or last words for people?
Wow. Whew. That's a lot of pressure. No.
It will be there forever. No.
I think it's just, I mean, it's just what you said. It's about finding what works for you and your family and really listening to yourself and to your kids and not listening to all the outside voices.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they're voices that we hear within ourselves, but they've ultimately come from the outside. Or maybe it's actually family member or friends or whatnot that are telling you, you're doing this wrong, you need to do this differently. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So
I love that. That's, I mean, and that's kind of what this life is kind of all about. Like, you know, trying to figure out what should I do? What will work for me? What are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What do I need to work on? What can I do? Kind of a thing. And then help your kids do the same. And yeah, and I really like that description you gave of the escalation, because I think that, yeah, I think that's how you keep things in balance, is you don't escalate along with your kids.
Right. Then you're just acting like a kid too.
Right. Right. Which I think is part of the reason why parenting can be so difficult, because you really have to grow up. Like,
Oh, yes.
it's
Yes.
not your turn to be a kid anymore.
Right. That's such a great way to put it. Yeah. It's not your turn.
Yeah. Your turn's over.
Yeah. And that's a hard lesson to learn. It's really hard.
I mean, I think, at least for me, being a parent has been like, there's been so many lessons, like so many things I really didn't really want to know about, but
yeah.
but now I do.
Right.
So yeah, but it's good overall. Well, thank you so much. This has just been really fun for me. It's been really fun to get to know you. Thank you for sharing yourself and your experiences and your wisdom with us. And yeah, so after, if you could send me, if you want to send me like some of your life coaching or any resources, the name of the book that you mentioned,
Okay.
anything else that you think people might be interested in, I can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
They can get in
Sounds
touch with
good.
you if you want, if you have time, or
Okay.
whatever, then that would be great.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank